Welcome to the Feedback Podcast. Today we're tackling a really complex and, frankly, quite concerning situation. We're doing a deep dive into the recent spike in tensions between Pakistan and India. And specifically, we want to look at the troubling role that misinformation seems to be playing in making everything even more fraught.
It's definitely a volatile mix, information and conflict.
Absolutely. So we've gathered a set of documents to try and get a clearer picture. We've got a transcript of an Indian government briefing reported by Sky News.
Okay.
Then there's an academic study. This one's from the American Political Science Review, pretty high-level journal, looking into misinformation and vigilantism in both countries.
That sounds interesting.
We also have an opinion piece from Counterview, which takes a critical look at how some Western media outlets have covered India's recent actions.
Right, the media angle is always crucial.
And finally, a news report from Pakistan today, which gives us a sense of some of the sort of on-the-ground consequences of all this tension.
Got it. A good mix of perspectives.
Yeah, that's the hope. Our mission here is really to sift through these different narratives, try to pinpoint where false or misleading information might be spreading, and just understand the potential impact of it all.
Okay, let's get into it. Where do we start?
Let's start with the Indian perspective. Based on that Sky News transcript, what immediately jumps out is how stark the narratives are.
Right. India, in that briefing, very clearly accuses Pakistan of basically launching a misinformation campaign right after that terrorist attack in Pahalgam.
And they're quite specific, aren't they?
Uh-huh.
They state their military response was aimed only at terrorist infrastructure inside Pakistan.
Exactly. Unequivocally stating they did not target any Pakistani military assets. That's a key distinction they're making.
But Pakistan, according to this briefing, is denying any involvement with terrorism whatsoever.
Which India strongly refutes. They don't mince words. They refer to Pakistan as an epicenter of global terrorism.
Strong language. They cite Osama bin Laden being found there, don't they?
They do. And the history of cross-border attacks. Plus, accusing Pakistan of, sheltering leaders from UN-listed terror groups. They specifically mention Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed.
So they're painting a very specific picture, linking current events to a longer pattern.
Precisely. And they bring up past incidents, too, like the Mumbai attacks in 2008 and Afenkat in 2016.
Right, claiming they shared evidence back then.
Yeah, shared substantial evidence, offered cooperation, but felt they were just met with what they call deliberate obstruction from Pakistan. Stonewalling, basically.
So that history definitely frames their current stance and these strong accusations.
No doubt. It fuels the mistrust.
Then there's this claim about targeting a dam, the Namjalam Dam, in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. India calls that a complete fabrication.
Yes, and they add a warning, too, saying if Pakistan uses this alleged dam targeting as an excuse to hit Indian infrastructure,
Right.
Pakistan will be fully responsible for what happens next.
That really dials up the rhetoric, doesn't it?
It does. And you think about how fast false claims can spread online these days. It's potentially very dangerous. It could really inflame public opinion and make calming things down much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Another big point in the briefing was the Indus Waters Treaty.
Yes, that's a major one. A treaty that's held for decades.
India is arguing that circumstances have fundamentally changed since it was signed. They're citing things like new technology, population growth, climate change.
And crucially, cross-border terrorism as a key factor in needing to reassess the treaty.
Right. They mentioned trying to negotiate changes for about a year and a half, but say they got no response from Pakistan.
So now they're saying they're putting the treaty in abeyance.
Which sounds like suspending it, essentially.
That's the interpretation, yeah.
Yeah.
Suspending it until Pakistan, in their words, stops supporting cross-border terrorism. And they emphasize they upheld the treaty for decades, even through past wars.
That's a significant move. It
Yeah.
really highlights the breakdown in trust and communication.
It really does. When diplomacy falters, these long-standing agreements become incredibly vulnerable. And accusations of misinformation just erode things further.
Did they comment on, operational details or if the national security advisors were talking?
No, they declined to comment on specifics like targeting near Lahore or any back-channel talks. Standard practice, often.
Okay. But they did mention feeling supported internationally.
Yes. They noted widespread international support after the Pahalgam attack and recognition of India's right to respond in self-defense. They also mentioned their IMF representative would state India's position regarding Pakistan's bailout discussions.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit. That study from the American Political Science Review, the one on misinformation and vigilantism, that sounds Very relevant here.
Extremely relevant. It digs into the link between false rumors and people's willingness to support mob violence, looking at both India and Pakistan.
And it uses real, quite disturbing examples, right? Like that factory manager in Pakistan killed over a rumor about a poster?
Exactly. And a Muslim dairy farmer attacked in India based on rumors about cows. These aren't hypotheticals. They're based on actual tragic events preceded by misinformation.
So how did they study this?
They did an experiment using audio newscasts describing vigilante acts based on those real incidents. Then they manipulated key things in the reports,
Like what?
like whether the original rumor was corrected or not. They also varied whether the report mentioned the police investigating the victims or arresting the vigilantes, and whether it included statements from influential figures condemning the violence.
Okay, so testing different potential interventions, what was the main finding?
The really key finding was that correcting the rumor, providing credible information, debunking the false claim, significantly reduced support for vigilantism.
Oh, significantly.
In India, the reduction was around 8 to 10%.
Yeah.
In Pakistan, it was even larger, about 17 to 19%.
Wow, so just getting the facts out there actually changes minds about supporting violence.
That's what the data suggests, yes. It seems to work by decreasing people's belief in the initial misinformation itself. And interestingly, this effect held up even among people who already had high levels of distrust towards the group being targeted by the rumor.
That's quite hopeful in a way. It implies facts can cut through, even in polarized situations.
It does offer a potential avenue, yeah.
Yeah.
Focus on credible corrections.
What about the other things they tested, like police action or statements from leaders?
That's interesting, too. They found that reporting state behavior like police investigations or arrests didn't consistently reduce support for vigilantism. And messages from elites condemning the violence also had a pretty limited impact in their experiments.
So, correcting the misinformation itself seemed more effective than just relying on official responses or condemnations.
In this study, yes, directly tackling the false belief seemed to be the most potent factor in shifting attitudes away from supporting vigilantism.
But there was an exception, wasn't there? Something about cow-related rumors in India.
Ah, yes, that's important. The corrections were less effective in reducing support for vigilantism when the rumors involved cows in the Indian context.
Why do you think that is?
The researchers suggest it's likely because cow-related issues are so deeply politicized and tied to strong partisan identities and religious beliefs in India. In those cases, just correcting the factual basis of a specific rumor might not be enough to overcome the underlying, more entrenched attitudes.
That makes sense. Some beliefs are just harder to shake, especially when they're tied up with identity.
Exactly. It shows the limits. But overall, the study strongly suggests disseminating credible corrections is a valuable tool.
Okay, let's turn to that counter-view opinion piece now. This offers a critique of how Western media has been covering things.
Yes, it presents a very different angle. The author argues quite forcefully that major Western outlets, they name the New York Times, Reuters, BBC, CNN, have been misrepresenting India's recent anti-terror strikes.
Misrepresenting how?
By framing India as the aggressor, essentially, and downplaying what the author sees as Pakistan's role in fostering the terrorism that prompted the strikes.
Can you give an example they used?
They talk about the coverage of what India calls Operation Sindoor. The piece argues Western reports focused heavily on alleged civilian casualties in Pakistan, while giving less weight to the initial terrorist attack in Pahalgam that India says triggered their response, or to India's claim they only hit terror infrastructure.
And they compared this to past coverage.
Yeah, they draw parallels, like with the Balakot airstrike a few years back, where they felt Western media questioned India's effectiveness and amplified Pakistan's narrative. And even going back to the 2008 Mumbai attacks, arguing they were initially treated more like a bilateral dispute than clear terrorism originating from Pakistan.
Interesting. What reasons does the author suggest for this alleged bias?
A few things. One is historical context, old Cold War alliances where the West was strategically closer to Pakistan. Another is what they call narrow nationalism in the West, perhaps leading to a more critical stance towards India, maybe fueled by criticisms of India's current government.
So, geopolitical history and current political critiques potentially influencing coverage.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
They also point to practical issues, like a potential lack of deep, on-the-ground reporting in the affected areas in Pakistan, and maybe an over-reliance on sources based there.
And amplifying unverified claims.
Right. The piece warns that focusing on things like unconfirmed civilian casualties or claims of shooting down jets without solid verification risks spreading Pakistani disinformation. It also argues the media often ignores what India sees as its strategic restraint in its military actions.
So the overall call is
For foreign media to, well, do better journalism, essentially. Invest in proper on-ground reporting, actually engage with the evidence India presents, and reflect on their own potential geopolitical biases or assumptions. To aim for fairer, more balanced reporting.
It certainly highlights how complex reporting on conflict is, and the different ways events can be framed.
Absolutely. And how important it is for us, as consumers of news, to be aware of these potential frames and seek out multiple perspectives.
Definitely. Okay, finally, that report from Pakistan today. This one looks more at the sort of ripple effects.
Yeah, it brings it down to some tangible consequences. It talks about the disruption to the Indian Premier League, the IPL, the huge cricket tournament. There was talk of maybe having to relocate matches because of the heightened tensions.
And something about the Pakistan Super League, too.
Yes, apparently the remaining matches of their league, the PSL, were relocated to the UAE, citing security concerns linked to the tensions.
So it's impacting major sporting events, things that affect a lot of people and involve a lot of money.
Exactly. It shows these aren't just abstract political arguments or military postures. They have real-world effects on culture, entertainment, daily life. It raises anxiety.
The report also mentioned the U.S. position.
It did. It noted the U.S. supporting Pakistan's call for a neutral investigation into the Pahalgam attack and urging de-escalation from both sides. But it also mentioned a U.S. Senator, J.D. Vance, stating the U.S. wouldn't intervene directly in the conflict.
So international attention calls for calm, but maybe a reluctance to get deeply involved militarily.
Seems that way. It underscores that the international community is watching closely, but the primary responsibility for de-escalation lies with India and Pakistan.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, first, the starkly different narratives coming from India and Pakistan are undeniable. Accusations and counter-accusations, especially regarding misinformation.
Right. Then we have that academic evidence suggesting that misinformation does fuel support for violence, but also, importantly, that credible corrections can make a difference in reducing that support.
Yeah, that's a key point. Though with caveats, like those deeply held beliefs, say, around the cow issue in India being harder to shift just with facts.
Then there's the whole question of media portrayal, with that Counterview piece alleging significant bias in Western reporting, urging more critical and grounded journalism.
And finally, the real-world impacts. Things like sporting events being disrupted show this isn't just happening at a high political level. It affects ordinary life and raises the temperature generally.
It's incredibly complex. There are layers upon layers here: historical grievances, political maneuvering, the power of information and disinformation in the digital age, and real human consequences.
Absolutely. It really demands that we all approach information coming from any source with a critical eye, trying to understand the context and potential biases.
Which leads us, I think, to a final thought for you, the listener. Given this landscape, the conflicting stories, the proven danger of misinformation fueling violence, how can we as individuals get better at navigating it all?
Yeah, how can you personally sift through the noise, try to discern fact from fiction, or at least understand the different narratives being pushed? And maybe more importantly, how can we ensure our own consumption and sharing of information contributes to, well, dialing things down rather than fueling further division, especially in these really sensitive geopolitical hotspots?
Really crucial questions to mull over. Something for all of us to think about. Thanks for walking through these sources with us today.
My pleasure. It's vital stuff to discuss.
Till next time.